Marcus had worked as a janitor at Ashford Academy for nearly 15 years. The prestigious private school sat on a sprawling estate in Connecticut, surrounded by manicured gardens and historic buildings that had educated generations of wealthy families. Every morning, Marcus arrived at 5 o'clock before the sun came up, pushing his cart through the empty hallways with the kind of quiet efficiency that comes from doing the same job for so many years. He knew every corner of the school, every squeaky floorboard, every place where the afternoon light would leave dust patterns on the marble floors. The other staff members acknowledged him with nods and occasional greetings. The teachers were polite in that distant way that comes from not really knowing someone. The students barely registered his presence at all. They moved through the halls with the confidence of people who had never questioned their place in the world, their uniforms pristine, their voices carrying the ease of those accustomed to being heard. Marcus existed in the background of their lives, as much a fixture as the stone walls and ornate chandeliers. Marcus lived alone in a modest apartment across town with his elderly mother, whom he helped care for on weekends. He had never married, had never traveled far from the state, had never pursued the ambitions that might have taken him elsewhere. Life had simply happened to him in a series of small, manageable events. He had taken the janitor position to pay bills and help his family survive. And somehow 15 years had passed without him noticing that his life had settled into a permanent shape. The music room was on the 3rd floor of the East Wing, a space that Marcus rarely entered. It was maintained primarily by another staff member, but occasionally Marcus would pass by and see students sitting at the pianos during lunch periods or after school. The room was beautiful, filled with natural light from tall windows and lined with instruments that probably cost more than everything Marcus owned combined. He would glance in sometimes, noticing the way some students played with mechanical precision while others seemed to be struggling through their required lessons. On this particular Tuesday in March, Marcus had finished his regular route early. The weather was unusually warm for early spring, and the school felt quieter than usual because several students were away on a field trip. He was pushing his cart toward the storage closet when he heard the sound of a piano being played badly. Someone was striking the keys with no rhythm, no understanding, no grace. The notes were discordant and frustrated. Marcus paused in the hallway, mop in hand, listening to what sounded like a student venting their anger through the instrument. He had learned to play piano as a child. His mother had taught him when they lived in a small house with just enough room for an upright piano that his grandfather had left them. Marcus had shown real talent as a young person. His teachers had encouraged him to pursue music seriously, to apply to conservatories and universities with strong music programs. But his father had left when Marcus was 12, and his mother had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. The piano became the first thing they had to sell when bills accumulated and choices became impossible. Marcus had not played since then, had not even touched a piano for more than 40 years. The discordant sounds continued, and something in Marcus made him stop completely. He set down his mop and walked toward the music room. Through the glass window in the door, he could see a girl sitting at the grand piano. She was probably about 14 years old, wearing the Ashford Academy uniform, and she was crying while she played. Her shoulders were shaking, and her playing was growing more aggressive, more desperate. Marcus recognized something in her, the way her fingers struck the keys without any real knowledge of what they were doing, just needing to make noise, needing to express something that words could not carry. He stood there for a moment, watching her struggle. Then he did something he had never done in his 15 years at the school. He opened the door and stepped inside. The girl jumped, startled, her hands falling away from the piano. She looked terrified and embarrassed, seeing the janitor standing in her private space. Marcus did not say anything. He simply walked over to the piano bench and, without asking for permission, sat down beside her. The girl started to move away, but Marcus placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The music that came from his fingers surprised them both. It was a piece he had learned as a child, a simple but beautiful composition that his mother had taught him. His hands remembered the movements even after all those decades of not playing. The notes flowed naturally, each one following the next with a kind of inevitability that only came from real understanding. He played with his eyes closed, and the girl, instead of leaving, sat frozen beside him, watching his weathered hands move across the keys. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them. When Marcus finished the piece, silence filled the music room. The girl stared at him with an expression that mixed disbelief with something else, something that looked like recognition. Neither of them moved or spoke for several long seconds. The late morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust particles that floated in the air between them. Marcus stood up slowly from the bench. He had broken an unspoken rule by entering the music room, by sitting at the piano, by making his presence known in a space where he was supposed to remain invisible. He expected the girl to say something dismissive or to threaten to report him to the administration. Instead, she asked his name in a voice that was barely above a whisper. He told her his name was Marcus, and he asked if she was all right. The girl hesitated, seeming to wrestle with whether she should answer honestly or maintain the polite distance that existed between students and staff. Something about what she had just witnessed seemed to shift that dynamic. She introduced herself as Sophie Hartwell, and she explained that she was failing her piano lessons. Her parents had enrolled her at Ashford Academy specifically because the school had an excellent music program. They had high expectations that she would develop into an accomplished pianist, the kind of young woman who could play at charity galas and impress people at universities. Sophie told Marcus that she had no natural talent for the instrument. She had been taking lessons since she was 7 years old, and every year her parents hired better teachers, spent more money, pushed her harder. But nothing seemed to work. The technical aspects of reading music came easily enough, but playing felt mechanical and cold to her. She could not make the piano sing the way her teachers insisted it should. Every lesson became another experience of disappointment, another confirmation that she was failing at something that should have been simple for someone with her advantages. Marcus listened without interrupting. He understood something about the weight of other people's expectations, about the way failure could feel personal even when it came from not fitting into someone else's vision. He asked Sophie if she actually wanted to play piano or if she was playing because her parents wanted her to. The question seemed to catch her off guard. She sat quietly for a long moment, and then she started crying again, this time with less anger and more genuine sadness. She admitted that she did not know how to play because she wanted to. She had learned to play because it was what was expected, because it was supposed to make her special and accomplished. But every time she sat at the bench, she felt only pressure and anxiety. Music had become a source of shame rather than joy. She envied students like her classmate Jennifer, who seemed to breeze through her piano studies without any apparent effort, who played with confidence and was always being praised. Marcus sat back down at the piano and asked Sophie if she would like him to teach her something. Not the technical exercises that her formal lessons required, but something different. He began to explain that real music was not about playing the right notes in the right order. Real music was about understanding what you were trying to express and finding the notes that matched that feeling. He said that some of the greatest musicians in the world had never been able to read music perfectly, but they could make people cry or dance or think because they understood something fundamental about emotion and sound. He placed her hands on the keys in a different position than she had been taught. He showed her a simple melody, something with a sad and gentle quality. He did not make her worry about precision or speed. Instead, he just asked her to feel the shape of the music, to let her fingers find their way through the pattern. It was clumsy at first, her hands fumbling and uncertain, but gradually something shifted. The notes started to connect, and even though she was playing slowly and with some mistakes, there was something true about what came from the piano. Sophie played the melody through twice, and on the second time, Marcus could hear her beginning to understand. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. A small smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. When she finished, she turned to look at him with an expression of cautious hope. She asked if she could learn more. Marcus found himself nodding, and in that moment, he made a decision that would change both of their lives. He would teach her on his own time during his breaks and after school. He would teach her music the way his mother had taught him, with patience and kindness and a belief that she had something worthwhile inside her that just needed to be discovered. Neither of them could have known that this private lesson would soon become public knowledge, or that what happened in the music room that afternoon would become a story that spread through Ashford Academy in ways neither could have predicted. Over the next 6 weeks, Marcus and Sophie fell into a routine that felt natural and unplanned. 3 times a week, Sophie would find Marcus after her school day ended, and they would spend 40 minutes in the music room. He taught her pieces that he remembered from his own childhood, songs that had meaning beyond technical difficulty. He showed her how to listen to the music inside her head before her fingers touched the keys, how to understand the story that each piece was trying to tell. Sophie's formal piano teacher, Mrs. Caldwell, began to notice a change in her students' progress. Sophie was still not what Mrs. Caldwell would have called a naturally gifted pianist, but something fundamental had shifted. The technical errors were becoming fewer, but more importantly, Sophie was playing with expression and confidence. When Mrs. Caldwell asked what had changed, Sophie told her that she had started taking additional lessons. She did not mention that those lessons were coming from the school janitor. The other students began to notice Sophie's improvement as well. During the Friday afternoon recital that Ashford Academy held for music students, Sophie played a piece that drew genuine appreciation from her peers. Several girls asked her afterward who her new teacher was, but Sophie remained vague. simply saying that she had found someone who understood music in a different way. It was Jennifer, the naturally gifted pianist who had always seemed to breeze through her studies, who actually discovered the truth. Jennifer arrived at the music room early one afternoon, intending to practice before her official lesson with Mrs. Caldwell. Through the glass window in the door, she saw Marcus sitting at the piano with Sophie, watching her play while offering quiet guidance. Jennifer stood frozen, watching them work together. She saw the way Marcus listened intently to every note, the way he would occasionally stop Sophie to explain something with patience and genuine care. She saw something in that interaction that she had never experienced in her own formal training. Jennifer waited until Marcus and Sophie had finished their session and left the music room. Then she approached Marcus directly. She asked him bluntly if he would teach her as well. Marcus seemed surprised by the request. He explained that he was just helping a friend, that he was not really a teacher. Jennifer persisted, saying that she had heard the difference in how Sophie played and that she wanted to understand what was happening in those lessons. Marcus agreed to teach Jennifer, though he warned her that his approach might be different from what she was used to. What surprised Jennifer was that Marcus did not focus on her obvious technical abilities. Instead, he asked her questions about why she played, what music meant to her, whether she actually enjoyed what she was doing. Jennifer had to think about these questions honestly for the first time. She realized that she played well because she had learned the mechanics perfectly, but she had never truly connected with music on an emotional level. Her talent had become a kind of prison that prevented her from exploring what she actually wanted to express. Within 2 weeks, 3 more students asked Marcus if he would teach them. Then 5 more. Word had spread quietly through the student body that the janitor in the East Wing was teaching piano in a way that was different from the formal lessons. Some students came out of curiosity. Others came because they struggled with music and did not know where else to turn. A few came because they sensed that Marcus was offering something that went beyond technique and grades. The administration began to hear whispers about this informal teaching arrangement. Some faculty members were amused by it. Others were concerned about liability and the appropriateness of a non-credentialed staff member teaching students. Mrs. Caldwell, the official piano instructor, initially felt threatened by Marcus's growing reputation. But as she observed the improvements in her students' formal playing and their renewed enthusiasm for music, her concerns transformed into curiosity. Then came the day when everything became impossible to ignore. The school was holding its spring assembly, an event where various student groups and accomplished individuals performed for the entire student body, faculty, and visiting families. Mrs. Caldwell had arranged for several of her advanced piano students to perform, including Jennifer, who was scheduled to play a technically demanding classical piece. But just before the assembly began, Mrs. Caldwell made an unexpected decision. She added Marcus to the program. The announcement came as a shock to most people in the auditorium. When Marcus walked onto the stage in his work uniform, still wearing his maintenance badge, several people in the audience looked confused. Some parents nudged each other, whispering questions about who this man was. Marcus sat at the concert grand piano and began to play. The piece he chose was the same one he had played for Sophie in the music room that first day, the simple but beautiful composition his mother had taught him decades ago. As his hands moved across the keys, the auditorium fell completely silent. The music that emerged was not technically flashy or impressive in the way that classical training usually produced, but it was profound in a way that transcended technique. People in the audience found themselves moved in ways they could not quite explain. Some wiped away tears. Others sat with their eyes closed, completely absorbed. When he finished, the silence held for just a moment longer before the entire auditorium erupted in applause. It was not polite applause or appreciative acknowledgement. It was the kind of genuine, thunderous response that comes from people who have been genuinely moved. As Marcus stood and bowed, confusion and recognition rippled through the crowd. Parents turned to each other with questions. Students stood and applauded. In that single moment, the invisible man who had been working in the school's hallways for 15 years became suddenly, undeniably visible. The morning after the spring assembly, Marcus arrived at work expecting everything to be normal. Instead, he found himself summoned to the office of Dr. Patricia Chen, the headmaster of Ashford Academy. He walked through the carpeted corridors feeling anxious, uncertain what his summons meant. In all his years at the school, he had never been called to the headmaster's office. Dr. Chen greeted him warmly and asked him to sit. She told him that she had received numerous emails and calls from parents, faculty members, and board members about his performance at the assembly. She said that his playing had moved people in a way that was rare and valuable. Then she asked him a direct question. Why had he never told anyone about his musical abilities? Marcus struggled to answer. He explained that he had put music aside many years ago when life had required him to make practical choices. Playing the piano had been a dream from his youth, but dreams were luxuries that not everyone could afford. He had made peace with that loss long ago and had found meaning in his work at the school. Dr. Chen listened carefully, and then she made him an offer that he had never expected. She proposed that Marcus take on a formal position at Ashford Academy, not as a janitor but as a music instructor. The school wanted to develop a new program focused on what she called transformative music education, an approach that emphasized emotional connection and personal expression alongside technical training. She said that his work with Sophie and the other students had demonstrated an understanding of this approach that was exactly what the school needed. She offered him a salary that was significantly higher than what he currently earned, along with benefits and the opportunity to teach multiple classes. Marcus felt overwhelmed. He told Dr. Chen that he had no formal credentials, that he had never attended music conservatory or earned any teaching qualifications. Dr. Chen responded that credentials were less important to her than demonstrated ability and genuine understanding. She said that Ashford Academy could work with him to develop his teaching skills, and that his life experience and natural gift were more valuable than any certificate. He asked for time to think about the offer. Dr. Chen agreed, but she added that the school was prepared to move forward quickly if he was interested. She also mentioned that several parents had already reached out requesting private lessons with him, and that the school wanted to formalize those arrangements through their institution. Marcus spent the next week in a state of profound confusion. For 40 years, he had defined himself by his limitations. He had believed that his opportunities had passed, that he had made his choices and had to live with them. The idea that he could step into a completely different life at this stage felt both exciting and terrifying. He consulted with his mother, who had always believed in his musical talent even after he had abandoned it. His mother, now 83 years old, sat in her living room chair and held his hand. She told him that she had always hoped he would find his way back to music, but she had accepted that life did not always work out the way we hoped. She said that this unexpected opportunity was a gift, but more importantly, it was evidence that the gift he possessed had never really disappeared. She encouraged him to accept the position, to give himself permission to become the person he had always had the potential to be. Marcus made his decision. He went back to Dr. Chen and accepted her offer. The transition began immediately. He stepped away from his janitorial duties, though he spent his final week in that role feeling oddly nostalgic. The hallways that he had cleaned every day for 15 years had become familiar and safe. Leaving that work meant stepping into unknown territory. His first week as an official music instructor was humbling. He had to learn how to structure lessons, how to work within the school's curriculum framework, how to document student progress in ways that satisfied administrative requirements. He had to transform his intuitive understanding of music into teachable concepts. But he discovered that he had a natural gift for explanation, for finding the right words and metaphors to help students understand what he was trying to communicate. News of his transformation spread beyond Ashford Academy. A local newspaper ran a feature story about the janitor who had become a music teacher, about how his performance at the spring assembly had changed everything. The story was picked up by regional media outlets. Within weeks, Marcus received calls from other schools interested in learning about his approach to music education. Parents who did not attend Ashford Academy requested that their children study with him privately. Sophie, watching this transformation unfold, felt a complicated mixture of pride and a kind of wonder. She had been the catalyst for everything that had happened, the student who had cried at the piano and inspired Marcus to teach. Her own musical development had accelerated remarkably. She was no longer playing because her parents expected it. She was playing because she genuinely loved it, because it had become a genuine form of self-expression. But the most significant transformation was happening inside Marcus himself. For the first time in decades, he felt alive in a way he had almost forgotten was possible. He was using his gifts. He was doing work that mattered. He was touching young people's lives in meaningful ways. The man who had spent 15 years in the background of other people's stories had discovered that his own story was not over. In fact, it was only beginning. 2 years after that spring assembly, Ashford Academy's music program had been completely transformed. Marcus had developed a curriculum that balanced technical training with emotional expression, and the results were remarkable. Students who had previously struggled with music were discovering genuine passion for it. Students who had been technically skilled were learning to play with soul and authenticity. The school's music performances became events that drew attention from music educators across the state. Marcus had also begun offering workshops for other teachers, sharing his philosophy about music education. He worked with school administrators and music instructors from public schools in the surrounding districts, many of whom could not afford private lessons for their students. He believed that his approach should not be limited to students at an elite private school. He started a foundation that provided scholarships and free instruction for talented young musicians whose families could not pay for lessons. His mother attended the dedication ceremony for the foundation, sitting in a place of honor while Marcus spoke about why this work mattered to him. He talked about how circumstances and choices had once closed off his own musical path, and how he wanted to ensure that other young people would not have to abandon their gifts because of financial limitations. His mother cried as she listened to her son speak, proud beyond measure at what he had become. Sophie Hartwell graduated from Ashford Academy 3 years after Marcus joined the faculty. She had been accepted to several prestigious universities with full scholarships to study music. But she had chosen a smaller liberal arts college known for developing well-rounded musicians who understood music as a form of communication rather than just technical performance. When she left for college, she hugged Marcus in the music room where everything had begun. She told him that he had given her permission to become herself, and she would never forget that gift. Jennifer, the naturally talented pianist who had come to Marcus asking for lessons, took a different path. She decided to major in psychology and minor in music, eventually becoming a music therapist who worked with children facing trauma and anxiety. She often credited Marcus with showing her that music's true purpose was healing and connection, not perfection and achievement. The other students who had sought out Marcus's teaching went on to pursue various paths, some in music and some in other fields entirely. But all of them carried his influence forward. They approached their work with a consciousness that technical skill was only one part of meaningful performance, whether that performance was musical or professional or personal. Marcus continued teaching at Ashford Academy for another 5 years before transitioning to focus more extensively on his foundation work. He traveled to different schools and communities, demonstrating his teaching approach and helping young people discover their musical voices. He was invited to speak at education conferences about transformative pedagogy and the importance of meeting students where they were emotionally rather than just technically. But perhaps his greatest legacy was the shift in how Ashford Academy itself operated. The school began to reevaluate other programs with the same philosophy that Marcus had brought to music. Teachers in other disciplines started to think about how to help students develop genuine passion and understanding rather than just achieving grades. The school's admissions philosophy shifted slightly to consider not just academic achievement, but also character and potential for growth. When Marcus turned 70, the school held a celebration in his honor. Students past and present attended, along with faculty members, administrators, and parents. They shared stories about how Marcus had changed their relationship with music and, more broadly, with learning and self-expression. Some talked about how he had given them confidence. Others described how he had helped them understand that mistakes and struggles were not signs of failure but necessary parts of growth. Marcus's response to the celebration was characteristically humble. He said that he had simply done what his mother had taught him to do many years ago: listen to people, understand what they needed, and help them find their own voices. He acknowledged that he had been given a second chance, an opportunity to pursue a path that he had thought was closed to him forever. He said that he hoped his example would inspire other people who believed their lives were finished, that it was never too late to become who you were meant to be. On the drive home from the celebration, Marcus thought about the 40 years he had spent as a janitor, the life that had seemed ordinary and limited, but that had actually been shaping him for this work. He thought about the conversations he had overheard, the students he had watched grow up, the small moments of connection that happen when you pay attention to people even when they do not know you are paying attention. He realized that his life had never really been on hold. Every moment, even the difficult ones, had been necessary. The loss of his piano dreams had taught him about resilience and sacrifice. The years of invisible work had given him patience and humility. The struggles of caring for his mother had taught him about genuine love and commitment. All of it had prepared him to understand young people like Sophie, who were struggling under the weight of expectations, who needed someone to believe in them without conditions or judgment. Marcus lived another 15 years, continuing to teach and work with his foundation until his health declined. When he passed away at 85, hundreds of people came to his memorial service. They were former students, fellow teachers, parents, and young musicians whose lives he had touched. They shared how he had changed them, how his belief in their potential had altered the course of their lives. Sophie, by then an accomplished music therapist herself, spoke at the service. She talked about walking into the music room on that ordinary Tuesday afternoon, crying at the piano and finding Marcus waiting there. She said that what she had needed was not a more skilled teacher or harder discipline, but someone who understood that the most important part of music was not the technical execution, but the courage to express who you truly were. The story of the janitor who became a music teacher spread beyond those who had known him personally. It became a reminder that transformation is always possible, that hidden gifts do not disappear just because we stop using them, and that sometimes the most profound impact comes not from credentials or grand plans, but from one person simply paying attention to another person's struggle and offering genuine help. Marcus's life proved that it is never too late to begin again, that the invisible work we do matters more than we know, and that sometimes all someone needs to find their voice is for another person to believe that voice is worth hearing. Like, share, and subscribe, don't miss it.